What is your favorite example of a massive corporate failure? Sears was practically built on catalog sales and shipping items to customers. They had the infrastructure in place yet somehow missed out on internet shopping. Probably BlackBerry, they're an interesting case study in a company being sniped off of what 10 years ago had been an undisputed market-leading position by failing to account for changing technology. George Lucas offered to sell his computer animation company to Disney for $8 million in the 1980s. Disney balked, so he sold it to Steve Jobs instead and it became Pixar. Circuit City cutting costs by firing their most experienced salespeople. The chain was bankrupt in less than 2 years. I worked for Kodak Qualex and I will never forget the meeting we had talking about 35mm film. A person said he's noticing an influx of people looking to print digital photos. This was a senior vice president of Kodak saying, and I quote, "This whole digital thing is just a fad, it will blow over soon." Southwest Airlines last Christmas. IBM. They let Microsoft retain the rights to the PC operating system they put on the IBM PC. I don't know if this counts as failure, but Skype had a 10-15 year head start only for Zoom to swipe in during the pandemic. The entire Penn Central disaster. The railroad was massive but terribly managed and lasted less than 3 years before becoming the biggest bankruptcy in US history at the time. M&M's declining to be the candy of choice for E.T. I remember watching the movie in the theaters thinking, "Oh, Reese's Pieces, that's cute." Huge mistake. Yahoo was offered Google for $1 million, 3 times, and they turned them down. American car manufacturers in the 80s. I was buying my first family car and it was between a Ford Taurus wagon and a Toyota Camry wagon. The Ford sales guy said, "Yeah, the Japs have to learn they can't make cars that last 15 years," and then laughed. We got the Camry. No wonder the American car manufacturers all had to be bailed out. The Ford Pinto. Ford knew they had a problem, but they moved forward on the results of a cost-benefit analysis that showed it would cost more to fix the problem than to pay out lawsuits. The judgment in the first lawsuit blew their cost-benefit analysis out of the water because of the lowball number they used as the value of a human life. The metaverse. Pepsi ran a lottery in the Philippines, but when there were more winners than expected they refused to pay out the cash prizes. There were actual riots, a few people died. Adidas and Puma focusing on a sibling rivalry so much that they failed to notice when a relatively small newcomer called Nike overtook them to become one in the world. Nokia, they were not that big in the US, but they dominated the mobile phone market in most of the rest of the world at one point. When the first iPhone came out they were very dismissive of it. We all know how that turned out. As a Houston resident, it is in Rawn had lots of friends who worked there. One of them told me he used to enjoy the lavish breakfasts they laid on for their workers until he realized he was actually eating up his retirement fund every morning. Kodak invented digital photography in 1975. Instead of capitalizing on it, they bought up small companies and focused on traditional film photography. One of my favorite examples of a massive corporate failure is the bankruptcy of Blockbuster, which failed to adapt to the digital revolution led by competitors like Netflix. General Electric. So many Jack Welch associates destroying companies to make a quick buck for Wall Street. We could call Bain Capital Thanos because half the companies it acquires die and the other half are maimed. My favorite is when AW promoted a £1 burger to compete with the Quarter Pounder. It failed because most people thought £1 was less meat than a Quarter Pounder. I'm going to have to go with Union Carbide for that one time when they bought a dilapidated, crumbling pesticide plant in the middle of Bhopal, India, did absolutely nothing to fix it up before taking over production, then acted all surprised when a massive chemical spill killed every man, woman, and child within half a mile of the place. If you include all the birth defects and cancers that popped up in the following decades that were probably linked to the exposure, the death toll is estimated in the 500,000 range. The merge between Mattel and the Learning Company in 2000. Read up on it if you are unaware. This was over 20 years ago and people still study why it soured. The Walmart expansion into Germany was a total disaster. They blindly tried to force their way onto an extremely competitive market with a completely different work and shopping culture. Most Germans don't even know that Walmart ever existed in Germany, and they have since completely left the country at a massive financial loss. X. Sears, who had a store delivery point in almost every town. They could have been Amazon or Berry, but like many companies they ignored the wave of internet store and got pummeled. Imagine a Sears with a website like Amazon and either pickup sites in every town or door-to-door delivery. I'm in Canada, I kind of miss Sears. I grew up in a very small town and my family bought most things from Sears. The McDonald's Arch Deluxe. They lost over 30M on it. Arthur Andersen scandal. New Coke. Starbucks in Australia. How are more people here not talking about Quibi? Funniest shit I ever saw. McDonald's 1984 Olympic promo comes to mind. HTC diversifying from doing phones. Yellow FN Freight. Darren Hawkins is an absolute POS. MSN Messenger. Circuit City. In an effort to save money, they fired all the good salesmen because they were making too much and hired people at minimum wage to try to sell TVs. They soon went bankrupt. Sears should have been Amazon before Amazon. They had the largest mail order catalog business in the world, and it would have easily translated to the web, but they were morons who didn't want to adapt. Trump Ice, Trump College, Trump Vodka, Trump Steaks. IBM managed to go from one of the biggest corporations in the world that totally dominated its market sector in industry that was growing like no industry before, into a company that you may barely have heard of. Everything GM ever does. Intel inviting the Japanese to inspect their DRAM facilities. Target trying to enter Canada. Target opened and closed 133 stores in Canada in less than 2 years. Shelves were empty. Stores were ugly. Canadians hated it. Overall, it cost Target's US parent company more than $4 billion. Sears and the whole ordering thing. Happening right now. Twitter X meltdown. Looking forward to when Reddit tries to go public and no one buys it. Blockbuster not buying Netflix for $40 million. Hasbro laying off all their staff at Wizards of the Coast in their D&D and Magic the Gathering divisions. You don't gut the only departments responsible for your only reason for profit and growth. Like WTF are they thinking unless the CEO is planning on shorting his own company stock? The New York Jets. Famous Amos chocolate chip cookies. Originally they were like crack. I couldn't stop eating them. I'd buy several boxes and hide the bags so family wouldn't see them, and I'd eat them all by myself. Amos sold and they turned into absolute shit cookies. He makes them in Hawaii now, but shipping is a killer. Mrs. Field's cookies aren't far behind. They went to some local fat-free shit and they taste like garbage. Farkin Rawn. The General Motors that went bankrupt. Inmates running the asylum. Bureaucracy ensuring that only psychopaths got promoted to the top. For example, Roger Smith. He could have bought Toyota. Instead, he bought an automation company, Fujitsu, because he hated workers and wanted to eliminate them. Didn't succeed. Even today, the man who designed the Pontiac Aztek is in charge of styling. Most recently, he screwed up the Corvette with a bizarre rear end. Smile Direct Club. Twitter. X200B points furiously everywhere. X200B, we are getting to see it fail in real time. Personally, I'm a bit sad because I like Twitter, but its failure is the entirely predictable result of really bad management. Target's entry and quick exit into Canada. FTX taking the idea of making money out of nothing, and dressing it up like a tech startup with a suitably quirky management style. Then surprised Pikachu faces when it turns out that maybe it's all smoke and mirrors. Nortel. By far the biggest company in Canada. Sunk by poor leadership decisions in buying smaller companies, and Chinese industrial espionage. Enron. I know tons of people have said it, but I'm really enjoying watching the dumpster fire of Twitter right now. Couldn't have happened to a shittier guy. People are finally waking up to study Elon really thinks about stuff. HP Compaq merger. Perfect example of CEOs being worthless. Carly Fiorina was touted as a genius CEO, brought in to save HP. Her first order of business was to do a merger between HP, a $40 billion company and 2 in the PC business, and Compaq, another $40 billion company and 3 in the PC business. That should have resulted in an $80 billion company and 1 in the PC business, right? Nope. 12 months later, when the merger was complete, both companies shed 50% of their market share, resulting in a $40 billion company that was 3 in market share. Theranos. I guess because I work in the diagnostic medicine field, but it was obvious to me that Holmes was full of shit, and I found it fascinating how she was able to fool not only millionaire investors, but also flipping Walgreens. Crazy stuff. Quiznos. British Petroleum. Skype. Were synonymous with video calling, but somehow were nowhere when we all moved online during Corona. Bud Light. Not for supporting LGBTQ people, but for their ad exec talking down on their core customer base. Blockbuster. Should have bought Netflix, but they couldn't kill their core business model. AMC Movies buying a mining company. The AOL-Time Warner merger. These two corporations deluded themselves into thinking this was going to be something incredible, while the rest of the world was like, what? AOL is still around. Google Glass. I worked at Prudential, and they kept bringing on more and more huge clients while hiring only 1 or 2 people. It was a call center, so naturally, we got behind on answering the calls. I quit before the fallout, but it got so bad that corporate blamed the managers and fired all of them. They had to sell the company to Empower. Sears. They had such a huge head start on the current order culture by doing catalog mail order for like 100 years before Amazon ever became a thing. Literally all they had to do was transition their current Sir Ice to online in a reasonable time frame and they would have killed it. They already had all the warehouses and shipping infrastructure in place. Shit, there was a time you could order a damn house from Sears and it would show up like a huge IKEA desk and you put it together. They were once kings. Olestra. The company spent 5B developing an oil that couldn't be absorbed by the body. The only problem was that the undigested oil had to go somewhere. The FDA made them put a warning label on their products that said may cause anal leakage. It didn't.